Okay, we are in the book of Judges. I think it's chapter 16, something like that. Judges, chapter 16. Yep, that's where we are. Berto taught us last week, and you would think that I would have let him go all the way through 16, but when you're frantically going through all the scripture texts for the whole year, you borrow from some other places, and it just kind of didn't go to 16 for some reason. So, it is what it is, and it's a big chunk anyway. So it'd be good for me to follow up on that and move into Micah and idolatry and so forth. Let's pray. Father, we want to know your word. We want to know your word so we can do it. We also want to know your word so we don't fall into the same traps that these folks fell into. And we repent. I do. There have been plenty of times where I have been a nominal believer, where I didn't have a match between what I was doing and my faith. And I have grieved you, and I'm sorry. I am the chief of sinners. I really am. I'm a guy who's pretty well aware of my past and where I struggle today. And I don't want to be like that. I want to, in my heart, cry out to my Abba, Father, and have it be so real that I would give up anything, any day of the week, any moment of my life, that I would gladly lay down my life for you. But Father, I'm not delusional. I know that I'm weak sometimes. And maybe my friends are too. We don't want to be weak though. We want to be fully guided, led, empowered by your Spirit to do the things that honor and please you and exalt the Son. So be with us as we learn today in Yeshua's name. Amen. Okay. In Judges chapter 16, we are looking at Samson and Delilah. We'll wrap up that story, and then we're going to look at what unfolded with the tribe of Dan and how bad things got for Israel. If you looked on to Facebook or something, you saw that it said Yahwists in name only. That meant something to me, maybe not to anyone else, but I've learned that all my titles don't necessarily need to ring awesomely for the general marketing public. It just needs to make sense given the text, and it does. Nominal Christianity is a phrase that I learned during my seminary years. So it was a phrase given to us as a way of understanding that there were a lot of people going to churches that did not really have a belief, and they didn't really honor God above all things. They were going to church real well, they were giving real well, but they were nominal in their faith, Christian in name only. What I figured out about the end of Judges here is that these people, you might see the word Yahweh a lot, but they're Yahwists, followers of Yahweh in name only. In other words, the word Yahweh is there, but what they are doing to worship Yahweh and how they're trying to follow Yahweh is not Yahweh prescribed. It isn't what Yahweh asked for. They're doing what is right in their own eyes and labeling it as Yahweh. Now, I see this with Christians today, call themselves Christians, but they don't really have any idea of what the implication of being a real believer actually is. And that is, I give my heart to Messiah Yeshua, follow Jesus with everything that I am, and now I am a bondservant of his, and I give myself completely to an entirely different set of rules, a different rubric, a different framework of life. I've left Egypt, and now I've got to know, what does the Father want of me, and I must know them so that I may do them. I am to guard the commandments of my God. The people in Judges were not doing that. They were saying the right words. I've noticed this with people too. They know how to say a lot of the right words, but their words betray who they actually are. That's happening here. I've written a few scholarly papers, not too many, but just enough to know I don't really want to do that too much. And I did one referee paper. It was a brand new scholarly journal out of Africa. And I was assigned it. I read it. It was by a Reformed Jew. And I got to the end, and I was reading, and I'm just like, this is not computing. And I don't think this guy believes in God. Writing for a biblical scholarly journal, I think your mind thinks, you know the Lord, right? He didn't. Because before I submitted my review of his work, I emailed the guy. And I said, I just kind of have to ask, because I got to the end of your scholarly article, and it doesn't appear that you actually believe that there's a God. To which he wrote back, I don't. And I thought, that is the weirdest thing ever. I mean, it's my brain could not, I couldn't connect with what was happening. Now, that is common in Reform Judaism. But what I'm learning is that there are a lot of people that think they have a belief in God, but they don't really have a belief in God. Even these people in the book of Judges, they thought they had a belief in Yahweh, but their actions were altogether otherwise. So, in that context, we have this guy named Samson. Now, if this is your first time here today, you just kind of know a little bit of the backstory. Backstory is a judge is a person that God, Yahweh, raises up to deliver Israel. Now, why do they need to be delivered? They need to be delivered because they haven't fully taken over the land. So to go back a little bit further in history, go through the book of Judges, you have Adam and Eve, and then they end up basically prisoners to Pharaoh in Egypt. And Yahweh talks to a guy named Moses, and he says, Moses, I've selected you to go tell Pharaoh to let my people go because I made a covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that I was going to release them from that place, and I want to bring them out from that place. I don't want them to worship those gods anymore because, the Egyptians had many different gods, and they, unfortunately, you kind of live in that environment over time, and your identity becomes that. And they, started to get confused, and always like, no, I got to put a stop on that. And then here's what I want you to do. I want you to have a lamb that you sacrifice, and you're going to take some of its blood, and you're going to put it on the lintel of your door frames, which we'll talk about extensively as we approach Passover. It's coming up pretty quick. But I want you to call them out, and I'm going to meet them on a mountain. And at that mountain, I'm going to show them how to have a relationship with me. What do I want them to do so they can have a relationship with me? Now, after that, he's going to test them for about 40 years, and they wander around in the wilderness. And then Moses is going to die. Joshua takes over. Joshua is like this first judge, so to speak. And he takes them across the Jordan River, brings them into the promised land. And the very first battle is that falling of Jericho. Jericho falls not by any kind of might other than God's might. In fact, they circle around Jericho, and then they blow some shofars, and they praise the Lord, and then those walls come tumbling down. Then after that, so what happens is Yahweh says, look, I'm your deliverer. I'm going to have you go into a land, and we're going to start at Jericho, and then you're going to go to other spots, and I want you to believe with all your heart that you can overcome your enemy by my power. Now, sometimes it was by walking around and praying, but sometimes it was they actually had to go in and use their battle gear stuff, swords and arrows and all that, and they would go in and then they would conquer. But then sometimes Yahweh's testing them, and one of the big issues was a guy named Achan. You remember him? Achan, he took some of the plunder, and the plunder was from Shinar, so it was glittery, and there was 200 shekels. I think it was of silver, 200 shekels of silver, I believe. I think it was silver. You have to go back and cross-check me. But it's 200. It's going to become important in our story. 200 shekels. And what happens is because of his sin and he was not found out, they begin to lose the battle. And then they end up finding Achan, and Achan is kind of singled out. He's like, oh, yep, sure enough. And then he has to be done away with. But after that, the Israelites repent, and then there's a series of other judges. And what happens is these other judges do their jobs, but still parts of Israel. Remember, there's 12 tribes, and Yahweh has assigned each one of those tribes to go and take a part of the land. But some of the tribes did not root out all of the foreign people that were worshiping other gods. Canaanite, Perizzites, all the list of words that you can never say when you're asked to read. But they're supposed to push them out, and they didn't do it all the way. Every time Yahweh delivers them from the hand of their enemies, they start to worship Yahweh in the right way, but then soon they do what is right in their own eyes. In other words, it's only a matter of time before they move away from the things of God and start to make up religion on their own. See, that's an issue. We have not been given the right to make up religion on our own. You've all heard this, right? I'm not religious. I'm in a relationship. Stop it already. That's a bunch of bull. It is a religion. It's a relationship, but there's a religious construct. By definition, if you're religious, you believe in God, and there's a way this God wants you to behave or act in his kingdom. Every religion has this. You are part of a religion. We shouldn't be ashamed of that. I just want to know what my God wants, and I want to do it. So religion is not a bad thing. I just want to get the right religion. And I don't want to make up what I'm supposed to do. That's where we get into a lot of trouble, is when humans make up what we're supposed to do. Guilty as charged. I've done it too. But I don't want to make up what I'm supposed to do. I want God to tell me what I'm supposed to do, because God is, and I value efficiency. He's efficient for your life. Your life goes better. You want God in your corner. You want him working on your behalf. And he knows how to operate in the world of money and all that kind of stuff. But that's just kind of surface level stuff. More than anything, he wants a actual love relationship with you. And he's literally said, oh, you want to know my love language? Let me spell it out for you. I don't want you to be confused how to love me. So if I tell you, will you do it? That's where the jury's out. We have to do an honest evaluation of our lives. He's told us what we do. Do we do it? Now, it might be easy today. You're all here. But what happens Shabbat after Shabbat when he's commanded us not to buy or sell and to be with God's holy people? Or when it comes to these feast days coming up, you really have to plan ahead and work hard, because there is sacrifice to be had in order to observe God's appointed times. There is a cost to be had. Sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's with your family, whatever it is. But today it could be easy, but it could get hard. Here's what we don't want to do, is we don't want to fall into the trap that these people, these Israelites, kept falling into over and over and over again. But God in his grace, let me tell you what he's doing here, is he raises up judges. These are people that should stand for God, and he's going to work in spite of them. Samson is really full of himself. This guy has got flowing hair. This is the shampoo god of Pantene or whatever it is, okay? So he is this guy that Yahweh, before his birth, has said, I want you to set him apart. And he was to be a Nazarite, a Nazar. He was to be separate unto Yahweh. And here's the thing, you are all to be Nazarites. You are to be priests of the Most High. But what does it look like? Don't cut your hair. This is your crown. Your hair is your crown. It's your covering. and his was not to be cut. So in his day and age, your hair was a crown. And Yahweh often operates not in the material world in the sense that there's this crown. Instead, he gives us a head of hair by design that is to be our covering. Now, if you're bald, sorry. But it's the idea. It's the idea that we have a crown, that it is labeled with Yeshua, Jesus, Yahweh, and we want him to be our covering and nothing from the world. He is our covering. They were also not to eat of grapes or partake of the vine. So it's a wine, grape juice type of thing. But the idea here, kind of like below the surface, is not to partake in the goodness of the world. The world has good things to offer. Even on the way here this morning, there was a nice Ferrari. It was pretty. And I'm like, I thought that was dead in me, but it wasn't. I just kind of kept looking at it. And it's okay to look at it. You know, if you see a Ferrari on the way to even a Shabbat service like this, and it's attractive, you know, I can appreciate a nice looking car. But the thing is, I could recognize still, like, still the world just still grabs at me a little bit, okay? But he wasn't to partake of the vine. And then even his mom was to eat kosher while he was in utero, but he came out and he was not to be around death or have anything unclean, not to be what's called tummy. It's just this kind of Hebrew word that means ritually impure. But he wasn't to be around death, ritually impure death at all. What you're going to find with Samson in his story is even though he does these things externally, he fails on many accounts, and he's going to end up giving his hair away to Delilah. Now, it would be helpful for you to know that Gaza in here is the same Gaza that exists today. Verse 1. It comes from Azah, but in the way that it's translated in our languages, there's a G or a guttural sound in the front, and it means strong city. Samson means sun man. Shimson, sun man. Delilah means to weaken. So we have a man who's going to a strong city, and there's going to be a woman intent on weakening him. Satan is going to come to him not in the form of a serpent, but come to him in a form of a woman whose desire is to weaken him. And she's going to succeed. He will succumb. Chapter 16, verse 1, and then Samson went to Gaza and saw a harlot. Now, this harlot is not Delilah. This is just his first stop in getting his needs met in an inappropriate way. And Samson went to Gaza, saw a harlot there, and went into her. I mean, it didn't take him long. I mean, he is really full of himself. And it was told to the Gazites, saying, Samson has come here. So they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the gate of the city. And they kept silent all night, saying, let us wait until the morning light. Then we will kill him. But Samson lay until midnight. I'm curious here. Midnight, Passover, the angel of the Lord. Midnight. I wonder if there's something happening here, and I'll tell you because I'm going to put it in context. Verse 3, but Samson lay until midnight. And at midnight he arose and seized the doors of the city gate and the two posts and pulled them up along with the bars. Then he put them on his shoulders and brought them up to the top of the mountain, which is opposite Hebron. Okay, there's a lot going on here, and I'm still learning. Hebron is 37 miles away. Uphill. That's a long way to go. Even though he is a marred, flawed man, he had not cut his hair, meaning he had not abandoned covenant with God. He pulls up the city gates. The authority of a city is at the city gates. That's where the elders would meet to decide things. he pulls it up and he goes to Hebron. It's opposite Hebron, but it's in the vicinity, maybe on an overlook looking down at Hebron. Hebron, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are buried there. What's happening here is that Samson, through the power of the Spirit, has pulled up the authority of the Palestinians, the Philistines. They are two different peoples, but I don't say it all the time. Pulled up their authority, taken it over to Hebron, and the God of the universe, who is seeking to fill out, this is who I am, Yahweh, that you do not know, that I am going to make good on my covenant promises, and I am going to go against the gods of the Philistines, and you will uproot their authority, and I will show you that I'm taking your gates, and they will be destroyed right here in the presence of these bones of these men, that I will bring them into the promised land. All that stuff is wrapped up in here. Now it happened afterwards that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek. Sorek means a valley of the vine. This place where she lived, where the Philistines live. These are a sea people, but it's definitely for us, it's the Granite Bay. It's the Brentwoods, it's the Danvilles, it's the higher up people. They're all that. It's where you go on the weekends to have a party. And he meets this girl in the Valley of the Vine in the nice upper scale living place, this girl named Delilah, and the lords of the Philistines came up to her and said to her, entice him and see where his strength lies and how we may overpower him, that we may bind him and afflict him. Then we will each give you 1,100 pieces of silver. So of course, I'm doing my study. I want to know, how much is this? What's going on here? I mean, silver prices got up pretty high recently. I'd like 1,100 pieces of silver. There are 5 Philistine kings. They don't know where his strength lies. They want to give Delilah a chance for 500 years worth of income. That's a lot of income. He is very handsome, but you can have that, or you can have all the Ferraris on the way to church that you could possibly want. I should say assembly. Church is not actually the best word to use. Assembly, God's people. But I had to drive somewhere. So Delilah, verse 6, said to Samson, sweetheart, tell me where your great strength is, and how may we bound to afflict you? I'm not sure that's the approach I would take, but for whatever reason, maybe she's appealing to his muscular physique. Like, you couldn't possibly be afflicted, but we'd like to give it a shot. And then Samson said to her, if they bind me with 7 fresh cords that have not been dried, then I will become weak and be like any other man. Now, I'm going to skip through these, but as I skip through them, I'm just going to highlight some things that I think that you could go away, study, and think through. In each one of these, what Samson is doing is he is giving enough of himself away that he begins to make light of what Yahweh has given him. 7 is the number of Yahweh. He creates in 7 days. And so he doesn't pick 6, he doesn't pick 8, he doesn't pick 10. It's a completeness. So he knows about 7. At very least, he should know that there's this cycle of 7 that he lives into, and that every 7 there's a Shabbat. He kind of knows this, but then we have these fresh cords. Sure, these cords could be made of plant-based material, but usually these cords are made out of the soft innards, the gut area of an animal. Remember, he's a Nazirite. He can't be around this. And so he's kind of making light of his Nazirite vow. And he gives her something, and he doesn't mind being bound up with these 7 fresh cords. And so the Philistines are like, yeah, sounds good to us. They come in, they bind him, he snaps it. At the very end, in verse 9, it says, so his strength was still not known. Verse 10. Then Delilah said to Samson, behold, you have deceived me. You've told me some lies here, man. Now please tell me how you may be bound. And he said to her, if they bind me tightly with new ropes, which have not been used for work, then I will become weak like any other man. Now, the first set of ropes, that has more to do with temple rituals. These ropes are more like ropes that you would use for work. And you can kind of see it in Isaiah 5:18. I'll read it to you, where Yahweh says, don't mess around with these cords. Woe to those who drag iniquity with the cords of worthlessness and sin as if with cart ropes. In other words, he is starting to play around with sin. There's a heightening, like, well, here's another way you could do it. Well, they put these new ropes on him and pop, the Philistines come in and he pops it open. Nope, that is not it. It says in the last part of verse 12, but he snapped the ropes from his arms like a thread. Verse 13, then Delilah said to Samson, up to now you've deceived me and you've told me lies. Tell me how we may bound you. Now watch how he gets deeper into his okayness with walking away from the consecrated life that Yahweh has given him. You know, there's a point that we need to all ask ourselves, what types of subtle things am I slippery sloping myself into, that what I'm actually doing is I'm entangling myself with the world, and at some point I will be cut off and have my eyes gouged out. And he says to her, if you weave the 7 locks of my head with the web and fasten it with a pin, then I will become weak like any other man. In Isaiah 11:2, I want you to see another 7. Notice there's a 7 here. Weave the 7 locks of my head. This is essentially Samson giving himself over to, I'm going to now weave the light of my hair in with the darkness of who you are. But in Isaiah 11:2, the Spirit of Yahweh will rest on Yeshua, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of Yahweh. And if you count them all up, there's 7 there. Yeshua is a different kind of judge that raises up. What we have in Samson and what we have in the other judges is we have what's called a dark shadow. Yahweh gave over his judges. You were supposed to eradicate all of the evil and enemies out of the land of Israel. And you were to walk in my commandments, statutes, and judgments and lead rightly, but instead, all the judges get progressively worse. And instead of being a Messiah-like figure, though they're still giving into their own debased issues in their lives. Now, Yahweh is still gracious. He still delivers, but at the same time, all of these people fail. But there did come someone, Yeshua, who did not fail. Well, as it turns out, it didn't work. Verse 15. Then she said to him, Samson, how can you say you love me or I love you when your heart's not with me? You've deceived me these 3 times and have not told me where your great strength is. Now it happened when she pressed him daily with her words and urged him that his soul was annoyed to death. Okay, we might look at Delilah and go, yeah, you took nagging up a notch and he caved. But this is the world nagging at all of us. Sorek, the valley of the vine, our Delilahs are going to get you weak, and then they'll know exactly when to strike and annoy you to death. And in that weakness, you know this. You know when you snap in life. You know in your relationship with your spouse, you know with your kids, you know with your finances, whatever it is, you know when you snap. It's like that final little, we call it the straw that breaks the camel's back. We even have a phrase for it. And whatever it is for you, you've got to be aware that the more that you allow the hair of your life to be entangled in this knot that the enemy wants to weave you into, that's when you're utterly weak. Then he's going to turn up the volume and get you to crack. I'm just telling you and myself, better to be prepared for it and better to not ever give us a foothold to Satan in our lives. That's why when I tell you, I literally have told you this, I follow the Lord to the T on a moment-by-moment basis. And you're like, yeah, but I know you're a sinner. You right. But I'll tell you, I never ever touch the stove when the fire's on. And I never ever stick my finger in that flame. Ever. And you're like, I buy that one. Well, why do you buy that one and not the other one? Because the world is a flame looking to burn me, and I've touched it enough that I'm actually a lot better than I used to be, or I'm actually a lot purer, frankly. That's part of what, don't you want me and you to mature in your life? That when Yahweh gives a command, you do it, no matter what the cost? That really is my life. I'm tired of touching the flame. It hurts. It burns. But here's what I'm not going to do with that flame. I'm not going to go start messing around with it. Click, click, click. You never see kids, they'll do this, they'll get a paper towel and they just light it on fire just for fun. They put it out quick, but it's just the transfer from the flame to here to there, just kind of a fun thing. Well, maybe you grew up girl. I grew up boy, and that's what you do. Okay? You do it because it's fun. You want to know. But I don't do that anymore because at some point you make a mistake. I've got to make sure in my life that I don't make mistakes, because here's what I've learned. It doesn't just cost me. It costs other people. Now, I want you to know my obedience costs other people too. But that one I can live with. It's my disobedience when it costs other people. That one's a harder one for me to swallow, harder pill for me to swallow. Well, she got him. So he told her, verse 17, all that is in his heart. He said it to her straight up. A razor has never come on my head, for I have been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. If I am shaved, then my strength will leave me, and I will become weak like every other man. He's essentially breaking covenant with Yahweh. I'm giving my crown. We read in the book of Revelation that there's those 24 elders that take off their crown and lay it at the feet of Messiah. I mean, that's a good kind of taking off your crown. But there's another taking off your crown. Here's when you take off your crown, the moment that you give in to the pressures of the world, especially your family, and you no longer do the commandments of God because they are more valuable to you than the king. You say, my crown belongs to another set of people, not to Yahweh. If you have messed up, does Yahweh forgive you? Yes. Have your kids not deliberately hurt you and messed up in your household, and you're like mad as heck, but still you forgive and give grace? Of course, all they have to do is turn back. All they have to do is start to follow again, and what do? You freely forgive, you freely give grace. You want them to not do that anymore. Verse 18, and Delilah saw that he had told her all that was in his heart when she saw that. So she sent and called the lords of the Philistines, saying, come up at once. For he has told me all that is in his heart. And then the lords of the Philistines came up to her, brought up the silver in their hands, and then she made him sleep on her knees and called for a man and had him shave off the 7 locks of his head. Then she began to afflict him. It didn't even start with the Philistine men. She started smacking him. How quick the world will turn on you. Let me just tell you something. We will give up sometimes in our duress for the world. And by the way, our world usually is those things closest to us. But they will afflict you just like that. The turnaround time is very fast. And I'm pretty sure that Samson maybe woke up from the first slap and went, uh-oh. His strength left him. Verse 20, and she said, the Philistines are upon you. Samson. And he awoke from his sleep and said, I will go out as at other times and shake myself free. But he did not know. Well, so it wasn't until right now. He did not know that Yahweh had left him. My bad. I got a little ahead of myself. Verse 21. Then the Philistines, they gouged his eyes out. Think about this. What do we see when we find Yeshua? I was blind, but now I see. He had access to Yahweh. Yahweh was with him, and he rejected Yahweh, and now he does not see. This should be a warning to all of us. Sometimes I wonder, people ask me all the time about once saved, always saved. I don't get into that debate usually, and the reason I don't is stop it already. Just follow him, and it'll all work itself out. I do not need to engage in that debate. But let me tell you, texts like this lead me to believe that Yahweh could select you and you can say no. Then you will not see. And it will be far worse to not see for eternity than to have your eyes gouged out. And they brought him down to Gaza. That was not my argument for once saved, always saved. That is not any kind of argument. I'm just letting you know I can see how things play out in the scriptures in both ways. And they brought him down to Gaza, bound him with bronze chains, and he was a grinder in prison. It means he grinded out wheat or barley or whatever it was. However, the hair of his head began to grow after it was shaved off. So it grew. Look at this. Yahweh has grace on him, did not take away his calling, and he's going to get his strength back. Verse 23. But before I do that, I'm going to give you open mic time. This will be a good time. Anyone have any comments, questions, or thoughts on what we've read so far?
Hi, I'm Kathy.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi, Trevor. I guess I don't understand. God created him for a distinct purpose, and he made him be a Nazarene. And yet, it didn't seem like Samson ever honored him. Everything he did was the exact, it's like he didn't even know him or didn't understand what his calling was. Is that fair? And if so, why would God choose someone? I mean, there's more. I feel like there's more of a story somewhere in here. with this question?
The good question. Not everyone in the Bible is quite as horrid as Samson or Jephthah or what's coming up next week. And then there's people that cover up pretty well. I would look at King David and go, he sure had a heart for God, but he had some pretty royal mess-ups too. So depending on when I did the snapshot in his life. Now, I want you to know that every time I judge Samson, I've got to look right at my own life. I've tangled the cords of my hair in with the world plenty. So it's like in some ways, I'm really glad that Yahweh has grace with Samson. But I think a bigger object lesson here is that this is a dark shadow of the kingdom, meaning that Yahweh is seeking to still teach Israel and over again help Israel whom he loves, but it's done through progressively weaker and weaker people. Because over time what happens is their understanding of Yahweh is so watered down, it's like so muddy. That's why it's Yahwists in name only. They don't even barely know these laws. And by the time the Nazirite vow happens here, you ever see people that have essentials fear God? Or they wear a chain around their neck with a cross? It means like nothing. So culturally, he might have done a Nazirite vow, but every time in high school that he had a chance to break it, he's just eating what he wants to eat and touching what he wants to touch. And I killed a lion, I'm getting some honey out of it. I don't even really care where it came from. He's just so debased. But still, Yahweh used him, and nothing based on who he was. He just picked. But this is the larger story of all Israel. When you look at Israel compared to all the surrounding nations, why did Yahweh pick you? To which the clear answer is, no good reason. In fact, you were the smallest of everybody, but he just chose you. And in part because of the covenant relationship that he had with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But they themselves, the Israelite people, it was essentially you and essentially me. And this is part of the scandal of the whole story. Why in the world would Yahweh, this God of the universe, pick you and me? That you and I are just smart enough to be here today. How in the world did we get here? Because we're not really that smart. I am. But to the degree that everyone else will admit it here, we're not here because we're overly intelligent. We're here because we were broken in some way that got us to recognize that we need to submit to God. And we're here. So this whole Samson thing, again, Yahweh picks people not because of who they are, but enough to play out his story in them. And it's just enough. It's just enough. That he's going to tell who he is, that he's going to restore sight to the blind, that he wants to be your head covering, that he wants to give you a land flowing with milk and honey that comes with a good and righteous grapevine subdivision that you get to live in, but it's based on his goodness and not the world's goodness. And so he's telling that story through Samson. Great question. We all have had it.
Wait, real quick. In this, still Kathy, in this next portion, I guess he realizes, and now he's humbled because he goes back and at his own peril.
He does, and he does to seem to be humbled.
Yeah.
He ends up giving his own life.
Yeah.
It's a dark shadow. He ends up giving his own life to kill 3,000 Philistines, which the scripture says is more than he killed in all his lifetime. But in some sense, we see that our Messiah gave his life so that we could live. Parts of the Messiah's story is wrapped up in all these people,
Yeah.
but they are really flawed, messed up people. And that's what we have to recognize. Now, what happens is ultimately, based on what we see in chapter 19 and what happens with Dan, which we're going to see next couple chapters, is because it's not the Messiah, these, in some sense, fake messiahs, or those who are not worthy to really take the gates of Gaza and make good on the covenant and take it to the mountain of Hebron. Only one person can do that, and that is Messiah, Yeshua, who perfectly does this for us. But we're still getting some of the story in here. Now, Samson had an opportunity to do righteous things, but that's the thing. He was so full of himself. And we can't just go, ooh, Samson. In what way are we so full of ourselves? Whether it be our looks, our intellect, our social network, our jobs, our retirements, or whatever it is. I'm grateful I don't have too much of that. Okay? But I still try. Yes?
Something that I've thought about in regards to Samson is we know what was recorded, but what was left out? What was not recorded? What happened in the gaps? Because it says in the end of the next chapter, it says that he ruled for 20 years. So we have 2 or 3 chapters spanning a 20-year time period. And it also says he was the judge that ruled for those 20 years. So he did hold some amount of civil and cultural authority in
Yes.
in the thing. But I think it also helps highlight the distance between how far the people were distant from Yahweh.
Yeah.
If this is the authority that's supposed to be leading Israel, and these are his downfalls,
Yeah.
what is he leading them in? What is he judging according to?
He's a Yahwist in name only. Yeah. It's an issue.
I was going to point out that as well, and it says, and he ruled Israel 20 years in the days of the Philistines. And before we even get into the Samson story, we have 3 judges that are raised up. It says that they ruled for 6 years, 10 years, and 7 years, I believe. What's not said, and the reason why it's not repeated, is because in chapter 2 of Judges, it gives us an overview of the ministry of the judges and what did happen for all the judges in the future. And without reading that, you're not going to get and understand what did Samson do for those 20 years.
Yeah.
So, if you don't mind, I'll read chapter 2, verse 16 through 18. Super important to understand this background.
Yeah.
Then Yahweh raised up judges who saved them from the hands of those who plundered them. However, they did not listen to their judges either, but went whoring after other mighty ones or gods and bowed down to them. They soon turned aside from the way in which their fathers walked in obeying the commands and did not do so. What it's implying there is that the judges, during their time in their ruling, is they're drawing them back to the commands of Torah. That's what's being said right there. And that's the overview for every judge. So every time we see, it's very efficient. They've already said that about the ministry of the judges. So when Samson is ruling for 20 years, we don't just blink at that and go, okay, he was a bad guy when his life started out. He fell subject to lust, went after a Temanite woman, and he ended up going, but God said Elohim caused that attraction to that Temanite woman. He used that attraction to bring him in touch with the Philistines. That's that verse that we went over last week was the time where that's the point where he raised him up to take out the Philistines. That's his ministry, being raised up to take out the Philistines. And the Philistines are pointing out later on, they're like, we got to take Samson down. He's already killed thousands of us. So when he was within that, there's a lot said here in these 20 years. You have to go back to chapter 2 to find the overview of each judge, because it's not repeated every single time that it says a judge ruled in that time period over Israel, because they already told you in chapter 2 what the purpose of the judge was. Be raised up military leader, lead them back to Torah, teach the commandments. They failed to do that. They didn't always obey it, and they turned away, but they were saved from their enemies, and as long as that judge was alive, they were kept militarily, their land that were supposed to be kept safe. They were supposed to be kept safe during that time. So in chapter 16, verse 1, he goes to Gaza. He leaves the area that he's supposed to be in charge of, and he goes into the capital city of the Philistine. Should he have gone there in 16:1? Probably not. That's part of the downfall. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah. 20 years is a long time that we don't have a lot of commentary. I don't think Samson was a bad guy the whole time, but he was a bad enough guy some of the time. And it gets some press here, and we've got to work through that. But yeah, him and Jephthah, yes, he is. He is.
We hear the story, Trevor, twice. The first time, he is led as a judge to go and give an olive branch to the Philistines. And he gives his heart. I mean, his parents are like, hey, can't you find a woman here around us? I mean, what in the world are you doing? But they know that Gabriel came to them and said, hey, this is my anointed one. And so they give in, and they know. But he does that, and he gives his heart into this situation. And he says it right there. You plowed with my woman, or you wouldn't have known the secrets. And that leads to a series of dominoes and effects and making sure that when God speaks his word, it does not go out void. It returns manyfold. And so when we look at him now, 20 years have passed, and we have to assume that he's doing a lot of what he was doing, kind of the same kind of character, because that's who he is. But he goes back to Delilah. He goes and finds this woman, and he gives his heart to her again. And he, in the same situation, only this time it's in his face, because when you read this, she's telling him, tell us how we can do this to you. What do we need to do to get the... And as you said, he's playing with this, but there's something that's also going on deeply. And I think that idolatry is linked in Torah to whoring, to prostitution. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason why this story is presented in this manner, I think. And that is the revelation from the standpoint that if you go a-whoring, you're going to lose that covering. And that's exactly what happens. He loses so much of his deep, even though he wants to be loved by this woman. He wants to have the world and the people love him. He wants to fulfill this. But that isn't what's going to happen. It cannot be done that way. Yeah. And I think that ultimately shows you what Jesus' sacrifice for his life to us was when he looks down at Jerusalem and he says, oh, how I long to gather you under my wings. Oh, my people, how can you not recognize? How can you not see what's in front of us? And yet we're reading the story of Samson, and we're like, how can you ignore what's going on? She's telling you straight up 3-4 times. And Jesus is saying the same things to the Sadducees and the Pharisees. Why aren't you paying attention? You should recognize me. Yet we don't. And I think that is a tremendous lesson. So appreciate what you've done, Travel, with this lesson.
Thank you, Michael. We've got a lot more to cover.
Sorry, mine's real quick and easy.
Yeah.
When I was reading this, my take was a little different. I kind of looked at it like he didn't really know where his strength came from at all. When I was reading it, I thought, this guy doesn't, he seemed a little, he might have been pretty to look at, but he was a little light upstairs, you know what I'm saying? Because he just didn't know. And I thought, why wouldn't he know? And then as far as being a Nazarite, I kind of thought it was the parents, because even the parent mom had to be told to eat clean. So they weren't walking either. And so I think there was a domino effect where he didn't really learn at home what even that meant. He never understood where his strength came from. It was almost like a little bit of light Christian. You know, we're just going to do it with the minimum. Mm-hmm. But it just seemed like he didn't fully understand himself reading what I read. And that because he kept guessing to the courts. I thought he was just guessing himself. And sure enough, he didn't know until he said, well, nobody's cut my hair before. And it almost was like he was guessing himself.
Okay.
So I just didn't think he was super smart. That was just me.
All right. We can all try to think through these things. And let's move on to a god called Dagon. When the Israelites came out of Egypt, there were 10 gods that Yahweh addressed. Don't follow those gods. I am God, and I have power over all those gods. Now, one of those gods, maybe not the God, it's a different God because it's a god of the Philistines over in Gaza. They were a dominant people group, and they had a sea god. And this god was powerful. And they had a temple, and they had Dagon that lived in it. So it says that, here he is threshing grain. He's in prison, but his hair starts to grow again. He's got no eyes. Of course, again, 20 years of think time. I'm not sure how that all works, but we kind of move forward here. Chapter 16, verse 23, now the lords of the Philistines assembled to offer great sacrifices to Dagon, their god, and to be glad. Anytime you see in the Bible they made their hearts merry or to make themselves glad, there's calamity probably coming very shortly after that. And they said, our God has given Samson, our enemy, into our hands. Then the people saw him and praised their God, Dagon, for they said, our God has given our enemy into our hands, even the destroyer of our country, Samson, who has slain many of us. Okay, this Dagon God. Yahweh is in the middle of addressing all his competitors. There are many gods of other nations, and those are not the real God. Weirdly, the Yahweh, even though they have the right God, they are not worshiping that God. I understand the whole bringing them back to Torah thing, and that was their job, but they didn't do all that good because they're cutting up people. So there's issues in how they're doing this, and they're giving themselves to idolatry and so forth. But Yahweh is still having Samson pull up those gates, take them to Hebron. He's making a commentary on it. He's going to make good on his covenant, and he's going to address this god Dagon. I want to show you that Dagon is going to show up again. 1 Samuel chapter 5, verses 1 through 5. Now, I want you to notice there's not a lot of time here. I don't have a lot of Bible pages there after the book of Ruth. It says, now the Philistines took the ark of God and brought it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. Then the Philistines took the ark of God and brought it to the house of who? Dagon. And set it by Dagon. Then the Ashdodites arose early the next morning, and behold, Dagon had fallen on his face to the ground before the ark of Yahweh. So they have stolen the ark of Yahweh. It isn't in Jerusalem yet. It's going to make its rounds because it had been there in Shiloh in the book of Judges for a long time. And it gets stolen, and it goes and they stick the ark of God in a subordinate position to the god Dagon. And then he falls on his face to the ground before the ark of Yahweh. So they took Dagon and set him in his place again. Imagine being on watch. Come in, Dagon's over. And they're like, not good. We were supposed to be on watch. Let's pick him up, get him up. Now, granted, it's probably not a windy area. They've probably done a good job leveling everything. There is no reason for that God to be, but our God, Yahweh, has knocked him down. I'm sending you a nice, polite message. So they took Dagon, set him up on his place again. Verse 4, then they arose early the next morning, and behold, Dagon had fallen on his face to the ground before the ark of Yahweh, and the head of Dagon and both palms of his hands were cut off on the threshold. Only the trunk of Dagon was left to him. He's been dismembered by Yahweh. Now I'm really sending you a message. Therefore, neither the priests of Dagon nor all who enter Dagon's house tread on the threshold of Dagon in Ashdod to this day. So way back in the day, the threshold's a big deal. The threshold is the marker where holiness happens. Why do we pick up the bride and carry her across the threshold? It all stems back to ancient Near East stuff, where the threshold to the holy place is important. And now these people, from that time on, because the head and hands of Dagon had fallen on the threshold, I ain't touching that. So they step over it. In Zephaniah, I just want to alert you how important it is to know the Torah, Joshua, and Judges, because Yahweh has a threshold. And look how he responds. Zephaniah chapter 1, verse 9. And I will punish on that day all who leap on the temple threshold, who fill the house of their Lord with violence and deceit. You come into my presence and you just step all on it because you're all that. Is that how we treat our God? Here's how we do that. We become rebellious in our hearts, and we want to live life our own way, and we don't want to pay attention and guard the commandments of God, and we do things the way we want to do it. You know, Yahweh, I think about some people in my life. I don't want to get too personal. I have gone out of my way, bent over backwards to help some people. And sometimes for many, 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 many years. And then they go on with their life like I didn't exist. And I think to myself, what the heck? What the heck? How can this possibly be? And this is what Israel does to Yah. Step on his threshold, don't guard his commandments, live their own lives. Sure, Yeshua died on the cross for my sins. Great, I believe. And then go about their lives. Is that real relationship? It is not real relationship. Real relationship, that's why we Shema every week. Shema, a Hebrew word, listen with the intent to obey. I know when someone's listening to me and when they're listening to me. You know this with people in your own life. You know when they zone out. How much more does Yahweh know the zone out, the disregard, the sweeping it under the carpet? How much more does he know in our lives? He knows, he knows, he knows. Stop paying lip service that I sent my son to die for you, and yet you trample on my threshold. Well, back to Samson. Samson has some think time, verse 25. And it happened when their hearts were merry. What I tell you about hearts were merry, that they said, call for Samson, that he may amuse us. Some blind guy with big muscles. Got his hair growing out. You remember the Pantene guy? We got him here to sign autographs today. Come on down. So they call, I know I got a little loud there. So they called for Samson from the prison, and he entertained them. And they made him stand between the pillars. And then Samson said to the boy who was holding his hand, and he essentially said, can you help me? I'm an old guy now. Can you help me find where those pillars are? And he cries out to Yahweh, can you give me one last thing of strength here? And he knows he's gonna die. He knows. bam. It comes tumbling down. Verse 27 says that 3,000 men and women were on the roof looking on them, and Samson was amusing them. Maybe it seems like more are going to die. So then the very last verse in chapter 16, which is verse 31, then his brothers and all his father's household came down, carried him, brought him up, and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of Manoah, his father. Thus he had judged Israel 20 years. So it's probably a 20 and a 20. I looked that one up, and it does appear that it's 20 and 20, like a total of 40 years. Chapter 17. Now there was a man of the hill country of Ephraim whose name was Micah. Not Micah the minor prophet. This is a different Micah. And he said to his mother, the 1,100 pieces of silver which were taken from you, about which you uttered a curse and spoke of it in my hearing, behold, the silver is with me. It was I who took it. So his mom, he came from some money. His mom had this 1,100 pieces of silver, and Micah takes it, and they take very seriously curses back then, and she utters a curse, and he hears it, and he thinks to himself, ooh, she just basically gave a death sentence to the guy who stole this, and he just has a moment. I'm like, I'm going to get found out, and I don't want to die today, so I'm giving back to my mom. I've always been a mama's boy. Maybe she will have pity on me. And she ends up having pity on him. And his mother said, blessed be my son by Yahweh. And he returned the 1,100 pieces of silver to his mother. And his mother said, I wholly set apart the silver. She wholly set apart all the silver, 1,100 pieces. But she's not going to give it all to him to do what he's about to do. I wholly set apart the silver from my hand as holy to Yahweh for my son to make what? A graven image and a molten image. So, to the degree that they did have Torah floating around, it didn't stick here. So now I will return them to you. So he returned the silver to his mother, and his mother took how many pieces? I told you that would come up again. There's got to be a connection here between Achan's sin of the 200 pieces of silver, or shekels of silver, 200 pieces here. In other words, what happened with Achan's sin is somehow potentially kind of playing into the storyline here. And she gave it to the silversmith, and he made them into a graven image and a molten image. So it's not two images. It's likely first carved out of wood, the graven part, and then the molten is put on top of it, kind of like the ark with acacia wood, and then the gold overlaid on top, something like that. And then they were in the house of Micah. And the man, Micah, he had a shrine. So he's an adult child who stole from his mom. His mom gave him back 200 pieces, only part of which she had theoretically dedicated to God. And then he made an ephod and a household of idols and ordained one of his sons, and he became his priest. In those days, there was no king in Israel, and every man did what was right in his own eyes. In other words, there is no temple. There's no Jerusalem at that point. The temple's in Shiloh, but no one's going there. We're kind of making up our own set of rules and instructions. And maybe I can buy a priest. Maybe I can buy a pastor. I need someone to like special pray for me. I've even had this happen where people give money to the church. They don't even really go to the church, but just so I can get in good with God, I'll give you some money. Can you pray for me? Nah. Nope, that's not how this works. But he makes an ephod. He wants to get a priest. So look at what happens. There was a young man from Bethlehem in Judah, from the family of Judah, who was a Levite. So he has a priest, but he's going to end up swapping that priest out for the Levite priest, because even culturally, historically, the Levite priest is better, because who are the Levite? The Levites are the priesthood. And they're all doing what they shouldn't be doing too, but he happens to come wandering through, and he's like, oh, you're a Levite? This would be a better priest. Can I buy you instead? See how messed up this is? who was a Levite. He was sojourning there. And then the man went from the city, from Bethlehem to Judah, to sojourn wherever he might find a place. He's kind of this wandering guy. Young kid, he happens to be a Levite. He's going around looking for his first McDonald's job. Literally, right? And as he makes his journey, he came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah. And Micah said to him, "Where do you come from?" And he said to him, "I'm a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, and I'm going to sojourn wherever I might find a place, wherever I can find a McDonald's job. I'm just a leaf floating through the wind." Micah said to him, "Remain with me. Be a father and a priest to me. I'll give you honor." He's like, "I can bypass McDonald's and I can just like live here and pray for you and get paid? Ooh. And I will give you 10 pieces of silver a year." This is not much, a minimum wage job. But he's thinking, I can flip burgers or I can be a holy man. I'd rather be the holy man. It's not much money. I'll give you a suit of clothes and your sustenance. I'm going to give you a roof over your head. So the Levite, the young man, he goes in, and the Levite was willing to remain with the man, and the young man became to him like one of his sons. So Micah ordained the Levite. And the young man became his priest, and he lived in the house of Micah. And then Micah said, "Now I know that Yahweh will prosper me." Why? Because I've hired a young man, bloodline of Levi. I got it made. This is good. Well, in those days, chapter 18, there was no king of Israel. And in those days, the tribe of the Danites was seeking an inheritance for themselves to live in, for until that day, the land among the tribes of Israel had not fallen to them as an inheritance. Remember, all the tribes were to go into this place that Moses and then Joshua said, "That's your spot. Go and eradicate the people who are there." But they didn't, when they went in, they didn't do that. You know, some of the tribes lacked faith. And so they are kind of left to this kind of hill region, and they didn't really have an inheritance. So it was really hard to get their crops, and they just weren't flourishing. So they thought to themselves, we know this was our designated inheritance, but I think we could probably do better for ourselves. We need to move. Have you ever had that point in your life where life is not going good for me here? I need to move and have a fresh start. It doesn't, the grass is always greener. Don't think like that. If Yahweh wants to move you, yes, move, be moved. But to go running after it, I'm not sure that's something we should be doing. I kind of slid that in. I'm not sure why. Verse 2. So the sons of Dan sent from their family 5 men out from the whole number. So they send 5 men first. Now you got to remember, they're down by Gaza. They're oppressed by the Philistines. They really cannot make a name for themselves. They really can't do industry and so forth. So they find 5 guys, men of valor from Zorah and Eshtaol, to spy out the land and to search it. And they said to them, "Go search the land." Basically go north and see what you find. And they came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of where? Micah, and lodged there. And they were near the house. And they recognized the voice of the young man. They're like, didn't you apply at McDonald's where we're at? We know you. So they turned aside there and said to him, "Who brought you here? And what are you doing in this place? And what do you have here?" And he said to them, "Thus and so has Micah done to me, and he's hired me, and I've become his priest." And they said to him, "Ask of God, please, that we may know whether our way on which we are going will be successful." They're kind of like playing into his elevated status. "Oh, Mr. Priest, could you inquire of this God of yours and let us know if we're going to have success on our journey?" Go to the priest. Go in peace. He says, "Go on. Hey, you guys go on your way. The way on which you are going before Yahweh." In other words, Yahweh is going to bless you, which is not going to be like true, but he's just, trying to be a big man. Verse 7. Then the 5 men went forth and came to Laish, and saw that the people were in it they were living in security after the manner of Sidonians. So if you look on a map, the Danites end up living all the way to the north, at the very, very top of the Israel map. And they didn't belong there, but they're going to end up destroying Laish. Laish was Sun City, Roseville. They were doing okay. They didn't have any, they were aging. They didn't have any reason to fight anyone. They were living the way of the Sidonians. They had it all good. Their 401ks are fine. They're just all good. And they take advantage of the situation. They're quiet and secure, for there was no oppressive conqueror dishonoring them. By the way, Laish means lion that was a lamb. Could it play into Yeshua? I don't know. But they were, back in the roaring 20s, they were fine. And then now they're old and decrepit, and they've got their retirement communities. And they're just living on their own, not bothering nobody. And then the Danites come along. So, quiet and secure, for there was no oppressive conqueror dishonoring them for anything in the land, and they were far from the Sidonians and had no dealings with anyone. So they came back to their brothers at Zorah and Eshtaol, and their brothers said to them, "Where do you report?" And they said, "Arise, let us go up against them, for we have seen the land, and behold, it's very good." So they went up there, saw the retirement community. They're like, it's all good. They're basically old people. We can take them, no problem. And will you be silent? Do not delay and go to enter and possess that land. And then when you enter, you will come to secure a people in a spacious land, for God has given it into your hand, a place where there is no lack of anything that is here on the earth. Then from the family of the Danites, from Zorah, and from Eshtaol, now it's not 5 anymore, 600 men armed with weapons of war set out. Now the Danites, they were the second largest tribe. They had plenty of people, but for some reason they couldn't overcome the Philistines to the south, but they could overcome the older people, or the people living like the Sidonians, up to the north. They take 600 men, so they're armed with weapons, and they set out for war. And they come up and they camp at Kiriath Jearim and in Judah, in Judah. Therefore they called the place Mahane Dan. I looked that up and I forgot to write what that means. But it just means basically a place of Dan or something, nothing to write home about. To this day, behold, it is west of Kiriath Jearim. Then they passed from there to the hill country of Ephraim and came to the house of who? Micah. Micah is a popular guy. Some kind of stopping point here. And the 5 men who went to spy out the country at Laish answered and said to their relatives, "Do you know that there is in these houses an ephod and household idols and a graven image and a molten image? So now you know what you should do. You got to do something about this." Then they turned aside there and came to the house of the young man, the Levite, to the house of Micah, and they asked him of his welfare. And when the 600 men armed with their weapons of war, who were of the sons of Dan, were standing at the entrance of the gate, then the 5 men who went to spy out the land went up and entered there and took the graven image and the ephod and the household idols and the molten image, and the priest was standing by the entrance of the gate with the 600 men armed with the weapons of war. Now these had entered into Micah's house and took the graven image, the ephod and the household idols and the molten image. Then the priest said to them, "What are you doing?" And they said to him, "Be silent. Put your hand over your mouth and come with us, and you will be a father to us and a priest." They're talking to this young kiddo, and they're like, "Really? Now think about this, Micah." Not Micah. Micah's priest that he hired, who was a Levite. He's like, "Think about this. Would it be better to be a priest for this guy? Or is it better for you to be a priest to the house of one man, or one man to be a priest to a tribe of faithful Israel?" So one man, or you can elevate now yourself in your priesthood and be a tribe for a whole family of Israel. Come be with us, Danites. Go north. And the priest's heart, was merry. There's your clue. And he took the ephod and the household idols and graven image and entered among the people. Then they turned and went away and put the little ones and the livestock and the valuables in front of them. And then they had gone some distance from the house of Micah, and the men who were in the houses near Micah's house were summoned and then overtook the sons of Dan. And they called out to the sons of Dan, who turned around and said to Micah, "What is the matter with you, that you are summoned together?" And he said to them, "You have taken away my gods, which I made, and the priest, and have gone away. What do I have besides? So how can you say to me, 'What's the matter with you? You just came in and you took my priest and my idol. Oh, come on.'" And the sons of Dan said to him, "Do not let your voice be heard among us, lest men bitter of soul fall upon you, and you lose your life with the lies of your household." And so the sons of Dan went on their way, and then Micah saw that they were too strong for him, and so he went back to his house. Now they took, verse 27, now they took what Micah had made and the priest who had belonged to him, and they came to Laish and to the people who were living in Sun City. They're quiet and secure, and they struck them with the edge of the sword. This is not good. And they burned the city with fire. And there was no one to deliver them because it was far from Sidon, and they had no dealings with anyone. And it was in the valley which was near Beth Rehob, and they rebuilt the city and lived in it. And then they called the city Dan, and after the name of Dan, their father, who was born in Israel. However, the name of the city formerly was Laish. And then the sons of Dan set up for themselves, what'd they do? They took that graven image and they set it up in Dan. And look at this. And Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Moses, he and his sons were priests to the tribe of the Danites until the day of the exile of the land. They became priests of a corrupt tribe, worshiping a molten image that was bought with 200, or paid for with 200 pieces of silver. And I could just say Yahweh going, what in the world are you doing? So they set up for themselves Micah's graven image, which had been made all the time that the house of God was at Shiloh. Here's the implication. Wait, time out. I met you on a mountain called Mount Sinai. I betrothed you. I told you how to follow me. I gave you all the pillage, all the booty, all the plunder of the Egyptians. I gave you enough to make all that I needed to have an ark and a table of showbread and an altar of incense and a bronze altar, all that would tell the story of who Yeshua was and how he would die, the Passover lamb, and give you a storyline. And here you are in Dan, now up to the north, and quite literally Shiloh is just like a couple cities away. And you don't want to go there. It's too far for you. Oh, I see. Too inconvenient for you. You couldn't possibly go down to Shiloh and worship me on my appointed times. Oh, heck, you don't even know my appointed times. And you've got to make your own thing because it's just not convenient for you. So you're going to make up your own way of doing things. And you're going to bring McDonald's kid and come up here and worship me. I could see God just saying, I don't get it. I don't get it. You're going to have some kings in Israel, and then there's a divided kingdom in Jeroboam up to the north. He's going to make sure that there's an idol in Dan and an idol in Bethel. And he does that to the north and the south for one purpose. Because I've got to give these people something to worship, because if not, they're going to turn back to that other God, Yahweh. What has he done for us lately? People are so messed up. And we've got really one thing that we can do is we can say, how have we traded Shiloh for McDonald's boy? How have we traded the God of the universe for all the things that have weaved in and out of our lives and given ourselves over to the world. Here's what I know about my own life. I have trampled on the threshold of Yahweh. I'm sorry, Yahweh. I know that I'm a weak enough man, that there have been appointed times come along, or, whatever, and I just decide to go my own way. I have lacked faith in areas that's probably my biggest issue, is I lack faith in areas where Yahweh's told me to take steps of faith. But in my lack of faith, I'm like, did you really tell me to do that? Because I don't think you told me to do that. No, not possibly. You could not have told me to do that. There's just me thinking dumb stuff. So I know these feelings. I don't know what your feelings are. I just want you to know that Yahweh has a plan in all this. And what I mean, the plan is this. Even in the messed up story of these people's lives, and Dan and the idol and Achan's sin and all this, he's addressing so much bigger than Israel. Whose God is he defeating? Dagon, the Philistine god. He's defeating them through his people that are less than. My point is that our goal usually in life is, if you really want to be a disciple of Yeshua, you're like, just tell me the rules and let me follow them. And he's like, yeah, do that, because I want you to love me and I want you to know how to walk in my ways. But in the midst of all that, the thing is, not only, have you ever had this thought in your prayer life? I just want to survive, God. I want to make it through the end of my day. I just want to somehow make a life that counts for you and not totally mess my own up. I know what that feels like. And maybe you know what it feels like. But I'm so myopic in my thinking. There's a couple reasons. At least two right now that I want to tell you. Number one, we follow and obey and guard the commandments of God because it lifts Messiah Yeshua up. And what it does is it puts and literally enfolds our life into a three-dimensional discipleship way that allows us to walk in health with regard to our God. That's true. But there's another but. The other but is Yahweh is addressing global gods, not just then. I'm starting to figure out Yahweh is addressing global gods today. And he doesn't need you to become super party affiliated. He needs you to walk in his commandments and not give yourself to be entangled over to the world. He's like, can you just do what I've asked you to do and allow me to take care of all these other gods? I will do it. But you got to trust me. Unfortunately, I'm a man that's not trusted many times. And it hurts me. And I'm sure you can relate. It's part of the reason I get along with you, is that you have told me about some of your issues, and you have essentially said, can you love me in my issues? And I'm like, I'll make you a deal. Love me in mine too. I mean, I still got to help lead this thing, but we all have issues. But can we do issues together? And can we meet together, not give up in the habit of meeting together? Hebrews chapter 12, verses 24 and 25. As some are in the habit of doing, but encourage one another. As you see the day approaching, encourage one another in love and good deeds. Thank you for teaching us about deeds and works this morning. We've got to do both. The works of the commandments of our God, but also be led of the Spirit, because the Torah doesn't address everything, so we give to the poor and so forth. Even though Yahweh wants us to do that too. Last parting words on your part. Anything that you have that you would like to express. And we don't have to be shy. I mean, I've not ended at 3 plenty of times.
So, in Deuteronomy, God says, do not worship me like the pagans worship. And they steal an idol to worship God. So not only do they have an idol, but they steal somebody else's idol in order to worship God. And so it's like everything about that is just bad.
Right?
And you have a Levi priest in the house using idols and molten idols to worship Yah. So, going back to the Torah is supposed to be read every 7 years, so they would know that this was not something that they were supposed to do. And it's like they've gotten so far away, mainly for me, it comes down to the one fact that they didn't dispossess or wipe out everybody that they were supposed to wipe out. If they had done that one thing that Yah told them to do,
Yeah.
then the book of Judges would not have even been written, I think.
Who else? We got a couple up here.
Yeah, just a quick question. In Revelation, when it talks about the 144,000, I know Dan's not mentioned there. And I've heard people say it was because at a certain event that happened, hence why Dan didn't get that blessing. Is this the event that people refer to?
It is the event. Yes. Now, some good news. Dan is included in Ezekiel chapter 38. So I'm not sure how it all works. What I do know is not one sheep that Yeshua has is going to be lost. So I'm not sure how it works. But yes, this is the event. These are the events. It's going to continue on next week. It's Michael. Michael, there's one other person. There was two people, I think.
All right, well, thank you. It seemed to me, after just reading about Samson and the Delilah 1,100 pieces of silver, which you said was 500 years worth of income.
Well, that times 5, because there were 5. Yes.
So 5. And
Yep.
here we have the story of Micah. And he's stealing 1,100, which is a fifth, 20%
Mhm.
of that, which is
Yep.
an interesting
Yes, it
number.
is.
But you pointed out that this is Jonathan, son of Gershon, son of Moses. So I think it even gets weirder, because it seems to me that this, and this is a question, is could Micah be the illegitimate son of Samson through Delilah?
How would I know that?
Because you're standing in front and you're teaching.
Innocent bystander at this point. I have no idea. I don't know. I mean, maybe, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not even being fun. I just don't know. I just don't know. It just doesn't say. Well, here's the thing is, there's a lot, can you imagine there's a ton of stuff that I don't bring up because I'm like, I can't talk about that. Delilah is promised 1,100 shekels of silver, and then that's the exact amount we find and it's only 2 times in Scripture that happens. It's right there. And there's kind of this ubiquitous thing that we all kind of understand among each other, that Yahweh's pretty good about putting things together, and there's nothing that's like extra scraps. It's not there just because. So all I know is I saw the connection, and there you go. Yes, sir.
So Jephthah utilizes the vow to get his ends, what he wanted, and that brings the battle right to his door. Samson doesn't take the vow. He's operating under his mother's vow. So Yahweh has responded to the situation with Jephthah by giving them a Nazarite who's not contractual, he's ontological. Then after, you have the same manipulation with this fella and Micah. They're trying to manipulate the procedure by inserting someone in to fulfill the standards.
Fair enough. Thank you, Frank. Thank you. Anyone else? Next week for the Torah portion, chapter 19, is the grossest chapter of the Bible. But let me tell you, that in this dark shadow, though, Yahweh's using fallen people, and they are refusing to give their hearts to Yahweh. I want you to know that what Yahweh does is he takes 12 tribes, one woman in his eyes, and he takes those 12 tribes and combines her, makes it into one kingdom. But put under the government of men, one woman is going to become 12. And she is dispersed out. Because of the sin of men, she is cut up and dispersed in Israel. Not good. Horrible. I want you to know it's horrible. Evil. Yuckiness. Yahweh did not condone this. This is not the way it should be, but that is what idolatry leads to. It leads to the division of people, to murder, to vileness, to evil, is exactly the outcome that Hasatan, Satan wants. But we have a high priest in the order of Melchizedek who's going to take the 12 tribes of Israel and remember her. So I just want you to know as you read that and come and listen to Eli talk about it next week, that this is not something that God ordains. This is the consequence of a people who turn their backs on God. And it is never, ever a good result. Let's sing I know it's kind of hard to sing after that. Can I just tell you something? Yeshua has come. He has risen from the dead. And he has solved all these issues and will continue to solve these issues. Let's pray. Let's sing to him, and then we'll pray. Yeah, I get too scripted. Let's just pray right now. How about we need you? We don't want to be like Samson in that way. We don't want to be in covenant relationship with you because we were born a Christian. We want to be in covenant relationship with you because we love you. We need your spirit to keep us on the straight and narrow. Friend, if you are here today and you have never given your heart to Messiah, Yeshua, just know that he loves you. And all you have to do is say yes. Now, yes has to be real yes. It has to be you repent of your sins, because you know it, they're many, just like mine are. But you got to say in your heart, even now, Yeshua, I'm sorry I've messed up. I need to be cleansed. I can't do it on my own. I need your grace and forgiveness. And I want to follow you right now. I don't always know I don't know what I'm doing, but I will follow you. I will learn and grow. And I'll do it from this day forward. In Yeshua's name, amen. Let's sing.